right then, we are all set for game number 2 on what's hangover day, if I can call it that, in our part of the world. Bangladesh have done the job against the Netherlands. We will review that game later on ESPN Cricinfo. For now, on Maruti Suzuki presents ESPN Cricinfo T20 Timeout, all our attention goes to the African derby in a Super 12 game. And what fun it is to say that. We've all longed for Zimbabwe to become the force, or come close to the force that they were for many years in ICC events and international cricket. They've done well to come to the Super 12s in a tough group that featured both Ireland, Scotland and the West Indies. And therefore now we get a South Africa-Zimbabwe fixture this Monday afternoon at Hobart, and not the South Africa-West Indies fixture that you thought you might have penciled into your schedule. That toss will be slightly delayed. There were weather interruptions, rain delays at the Bellerive Oval. We're expecting weather to play a part here too. So once we do get news, we will have you covered on ESPN Cricinfo T20 Timeout. Anil Kumble is with me. You'll have the pleasure again of being a neutral. You enjoy neutral, or you enjoy what you did yesterday for India-Pakistan, where you had this mayhem all day?
I thought I was neutral for every game.
That's good. Raunak. Very good. Sambit Bal would like this answer. ESPN Cricinfo would like this answer. I'm just trying to test you, Anil.
Thank you,
You passed.
Thank
you passed all
passed
the tests.
I passed the Cricinfo test.
Well done. Well, I'll tell you what. We will try and put this test to a few more people now on this panel, because it's a double debut that I'm handing out for a South Africa-Zimbabwe game. Shall I go to the senior statesman first up? He's hardly just known as, the great Zimbabwe captain and player that he was. He's now a statesman of the game. He's won trophies all around the world. His trophy cabinet is perhaps even more stuffed than Stephen Fleming's. And it is my privilege to welcome Andy Flower on ESPN Cricinfo T20 Timeout for the first time. Andy, how are you doing? Good morning in the UK.
Good morning, Raunak. Nice to see you. I'm doing good, thanks.
Excellent. And giving him that little applause is a man who's received more than one applause in his life. He's still fit enough to get runs anywhere in the world. It's pretty good for a lot of teams, I think, that South African top order doesn't feature him anymore. But what a privilege it was, and it still remains, to watch Faf du Plessis play. This is a different test, though, Faf, as you become a cricket pundit, I think, for the first time in your career.
Yeah, this is probably my best debut to date, being on your show today with such an esteemed panel. But thank you guys for having me.
Are you really telling me this is already better than your test debut, Faf? Come on.
No, look at the prestige of the gentleman sitting on screen. This is as good as facing the good Australia at their best.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to hear. I thought you'd say, yeah, anything beats the Australians, right? So as long as you got Andy B, Anil here, that's already better than the Aussies. Yeah, but it's brilliant to have you, Faf. Yeah, please.
I'll leave the chirping for Andy. He's very good with all the chirps.
Are you, Andy?
I think when I used to be behind the stumps, we had to work out some way to get batsmen out. It wasn't always with our pace. So, but those days are long past. Now I'm very diplomatic these days.
Anil Kumble knows that more than Anil Kumble knows both versions actually.
No.
You've shared a dugout with him as coach and manager, etc.
Yeah.
And you've also, I'm sure, seen Andy behind the stumps. So
No, he didn't have to chirp because I don't think I gave him trouble as a batsman. So Andy didn't have to chirp behind the stumps when I was at the crease. But I mean, it was a pleasure working with Andy, and it's wonderful to see Andy and Faf on the show, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more banters going about between Faf and Andy, rather than, because it's South Africa and Zimbabwe today.
I'd like to know that actually, because we don't quite get the South Africa-Zimbabwe World Cup clashes that we used to, say, 20 years ago or so, before, when Andy used to play. But is it a friendly rivalry? Was there more needle in it? I mean, there's England-Australia, there's Australia-New Zealand, there's India-Pakistan. What's South Africa-Zimbabwe like? Andy?
I think the relationship is very much a sort of big brother relationship, with us obviously being the smaller brother. The resources that South Africa have sort of dwarf Zimbabwe's, and always have, financial resources, the number of people playing the game, and I suppose generally the amount of talent available. And their domestic cricket is much more powerful than Zimbabwe's domestic game. So it's a typical sort of big brother relationship, I'd say, and it's one of the things that Zimbabwe are going to have to deal with today. is getting over that, not being daunted by the prospect of coming up against their bigger, stronger neighbours.
All right, let me ask the same question to Faf, the big brother in this equation. Faf?
Yeah, I think it's incredible, first of all, to see Zimbabwe qualify through to the tournament. As Andy say, as a potentially a big brother of Zimbabwe, you always want a fellow African nation to do well. So I supported them through those first knockouts, and it's great to see them. I think it's really important for Zimbabwe cricket as well, making it through to the final 12. That's really important. So very, very happy to see them there. And what better way to start against South Africa, which is just, it's a very great relationship. We don't play against each other that often, but when we used to play against each other, it's a great relationship.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, this is the big thing for Zimbabwe cricket, right? It's been through so much in the last few years. It's almost neglected from the big teams or the big sort of cricketing market. But it was so important for them to make it from that round to the Super 12. Step in the right direction, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And I think there's been a real injection of energy with Dave Houghton taking over the reins as the head coach of Zimbabwe. I think his experience, his love for the game, his knowledge about the game, and his sort of calm demeanor will really be a huge help to those young Zimbabwean cricketers. And even though they have played quite a bit of cricket, some of these guys like the Irvins, for instance, I think having his experience around will be so good for them. Dave's played around the world. Unfortunately, he only started playing international cricket really late in his playing career, but he was a brilliant sportsman himself. But I think his calm hand on the tiller and his knowledge and his love for the game has certainly had an effect. And you can see that in some of the results they've had recently. Very competitive against India recently. They beat Australia in a one-day international. And now they've got through to the Super 12. So really superb performance so far. But I hope that they're not going to rest on that. I hope they're super hungry, and I hope they really take the game to South Africa today.
Yeah, wonderful words from Andy Flower. Of course, said part of a wonderful generation, a golden generation of Zimbabwe cricket. When I was 9, I saw Zimbabwe beat India in a World Cup in England. I don't need to remind you of that, but I could tell you, Anil, it made a 9-year-old like me think, this is a team that I got to follow now. And that had some players, Andy, one of them, what it would do for young cricket watchers now, perhaps have not seen Zimbabwe play India or be competitive against India or Australia, England, if they watch them beat South Africa or maybe Pakistan or India at the Super 12s. Cricket needs Zimbabwe to be a force, doesn't it?
Yes, of course. And thanks, Raunak, for making me feel old here. And
Zimbabwe, not the plan. Yeah.
Subtly put it in, saying a 9-year-old watching the World Cup, India losing to Zimbabwe, and I mean Zimbabwe was well respected as a team, and they had some wonderful players. Andy Flower, Dave Houghton. On my first tour, I played against Dave Houghton in 1992 in a Test match, and John Tricos, and all the wonderful players from Zimbabwe. Yes, they've had a bit of a struggle over the last few years, and it's wonderful to see Zimbabwe qualify for the Super 12s, and hopefully, like Andy mentioned, they don't rest on the laurels of saying, okay, we have now qualified, and they need to keep the foot on the pedal and move on, and hopefully beat a couple of teams here.
All right, yeah, absolutely. We want Zimbabwe to be competitive. South Africa is their first fixture. We will keep you updated as soon as the toss and team news comes our way at the Bellary Oval. But let's talk about South Africa for a moment, because when we did these pre-tournament chats with a number of our guests, analysts, there's also chatter I'm following on social media. There's an optimism around South Africa. These conditions, these surfaces, we've seen one game at Perth already. South Africa play India at Perth and a number of other quick surfaces. They've got a lot of bases covered, Faf. You know what the build-up is to South Africa before any ICC event. Is there something different about this particular edition where they seem to be dark horses or quiet favourites for a lot of people in the cricketing world?
Yeah, I think so. I think first of all, conditions is as close to South African conditions as you can get. So fast, bouncy wickets is what all our batters like to bat on. and also we do have some really good pace bowling. So I think from a balance point of view, South Africa is looking really strong. You know, four fast bowlers that can really clock 140, 145 consistently. Two very good spinners, which is also what you need in the Australian conditions with those big boundaries. And then also from a batting point of view, that batting lineup is looking really powerful, especially that middle order with some real good form coming into the tournament. So, yeah, I would think South Africa would be very confident leading into this tournament. But as always, you know, the biggest thing that's almost the cloud above the South African team is how well do you do in ICC events. And I think it's really important for the team that they put a peg in the ground today and put in a performance that will give them confidence. Because as we all know, tournament cricket is almost all about confidence and in what form your players are and how they carry that confidence throughout the tournament. So I think from an 11 point of view, there's some real good headaches for Mark Boucher, the coach. It's a really strong bench to pick from. Even someone like Shamsi hasn't been playing a lot recently. So, Marco Jansen has come into the squad recently, who's a very tall, fast bowler. So, yeah, the starting 11 would be an interesting one which they go for.
Yeah, I think we might get some news as well from Hobart. We'll wait to confirm it. But it's good that Faf mentioned that Mark Boucher, the coach, has some selection calls to make. It does look like that's where the buck stops in South African cricket. Can you confirm that for me, Faf? At least at this point, the coach takes the selection calls more than the captain or a touring selector?
Look, yeah, it's a bit of a combination. To be honest with you, there's generally a selection panel that sits of 2 or 3 selectors, and then you have your convener of selectors. So probably between the convener and selector, Mutampit Sang, who's over there, and Mark Boucher, they would be probably the 2 big voices picking that starting 11. And then with your input from your captain as well, which is Temba Bavuma, the conditions will play a huge part. I've looked at Zimbabwe, they've played all their warm-up matches at this venue. South Africa hasn't played a lot of matches at Hobart, so it's almost like a little bit of a home ground advantage for Zimbabwe.
Yeah, they've got the rustiness out of the way. We saw Bangladesh had their moments of rustiness today against a Dutch side that bowled really well, fielded well in the first half, kind of gave it up with some of their running between the wickets at the bat, but they were in that game right till the very end, even with the last wicket technically. So we'll see if this is a good time to play a Super 12 team that's not had a lot of proper match cricket other than the warm-ups that we saw in Australia a little while back. But it's a conundrum for South Africa. Faf explains the structure to us, but we know the elephant in the room here. The captain's place in the team is the biggest talking point ahead of the World Cup, Anil, and it mustn't be an easy thing for a side.
No, it hasn't. I don't think, when your captain doesn't perform, it becomes a very tough situation, especially in a World Cup, leading up to a World Cup, and also one needs to take a call. But, if I may say, I'm not really sure whether I can confirm, but in the corner of the eye, I had a look at the screen, and everybody seems to be congratulating Kagiso Rabada.
Yes.
So it could be a change that Boucher and the selection committee would have taken of perhaps naming Rabada as the captain, and that probably could be the biggest change for today.
Yeah, I'm going to, just like I said, Anil's given us the news. We were going to go that way, but we want confirmation if that's indeed a call that South Africa have taken as tactically or as a decision for their team at this World Cup, or could it be related to injury or illness? So we'll just wait to confirm that once we hear more from both teams at the toss. Andy, you followed enough of what's happening in South African cricket too. We know the situation surrounding Bavuma. There's also that clear contender for that spot. Reza Hendricks has been in the form of his life. Not sure what that does for a team going into a World Cup. There are so many bases covered, like Faf says. We all say they're strong, and yet this big issue remains of the captain's form.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one for them to deal with. He has been struggling for a little while now. I think 2 years ago he had a really good year. This last 12 months has been a struggle for him. And his form as a captain, I think he averages 18 as a captain in this, and about double that without the captaincy burden. So it's obviously affected him. And those of us, and we've all been captains actually here talking today, and we know that extra responsibility and how it can distract and how it can weigh you down. So if they have taken a call and made a change, it's a huge decision to make. And if they've done that, a very courageous one, I think, on the brink of starting the tournament here. So I feel for
Sorry,
Temba.
Andy,
I think
I'll just jump in because from the corner of my eye, I've got pictures that Bavuma is walking out of the toss. So that settles it. We thought we got to be wondering what the congratulations were in order for and whatnot, but just don't worry about it. It was nice little gossip and build up. It may happen later in the tournament. So don't, if it does happen, you heard it here first. For now, we know Temba Bavuma has taken the toss. Zimbabwe, in fact, have won it, and they're going to have a bat first. That's very interesting, given weather around at Hobart, that team winning the toss has decided to bat first. But maybe I'll come back to you, Andy. You know the news of the toss as well now. But South Africa have gone with Temba. Let me rephrase the same issue in a different question. That also would have been a call they needed to take. I'm sure it's come at the expense of an informed batter. How difficult is this? I mean, do you think it's an issue at all that could come back to bite South Africa, that they have to persist with their captain in spite of the form?
It's definitely an issue for them, no doubt. It'll be a constant talking point until he starts scoring runs again. I think he's very fortunate that the first game here is against Zimbabwe, I think, because it gives him a great opportunity to get in there and do exactly that, score some runs. But it's an issue that's not going to go away if either he doesn't score runs or if South Africa lose a few games. So a significant issue. I know a little about Temba. Obviously, Faf knows him much better than I do. Yep. But I think he's a courageous young guy, and I think he's held himself well under the pressure and the burden of leading his country's national team.
Yeah, I like that you said that. That was exactly where I was going to go next with Faf. Faf, Temba, you know him better than any of us. There's a lot to like about Temba Bavuma. He carries himself with a lot of dignity, even amidst issues surrounding the team, on and off the field. Here he is now struggling for his own form and all the conversation around it. How do you think he's feeling right now? How do you think he's going to react?
Yeah, me too. I've always also been impressed with some of the leadership stuff that he's shown throughout the last year. So I think from a captaincy perspective, he's definitely carried himself really well. Unfortunately, the game of cricket, the currency that you get measured at is your skill. And that's, for him, that's going to be runs. So right now, there is a bit of pressure on him. But also, me being in that position myself, I understand that that's a burden that comes with captaincy. Unfortunately, people will judge you on the runs that you score and also, as you said, the team's performances. So I think once a team is winning, as a captain, you can always feel like you can almost be under the radar a little bit, but especially when the team is losing, that's when that light just shines on you and you can really feel the pressure. So for Temba, the best way to get the pressure off him is just to go in there and score some runs. I know that's a lot easier said than done, but what a way to start against Zimbabwe today. It gets in the middle. I think also from a role perspective, a lot of talk goes around Temba's strike rate, and I think his role in the team is almost just being that guy that can anchor the innings, and you have the explosiveness of the batters coming in and playing around him. That's what you can get right. Then get some runs, then you get that pressure off you. But rightly, as everyone say, if you're not going to get runs, that's certainly going to be a big topic this World Cup, and other teams will use that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valid point. South Africa start against Zimbabwe. They've got their next game against Bangladesh. You would have rather had perhaps those two opening games if you're Temba Bavuma than have them against India and Pakistan, which are the other two more formidable teams in the group, you think, with no disrespect meant to the others. Right, decisions been made at the toss. It looks like Zimbabwe said they were going to bat and Temba Bavuma said they were going to bowl anyway. So it's just we just wasted our time here. They could have just figured this out and gone back. Are you surprised with the decision, though, with rain around in Hobart, that Zimbabwe wants to bat first?
It's a bit surprising because there was certainly some stoppages in the first game when Bangladesh played Netherlands. So it's a bit surprising. But I guess Zimbabwe probably would have said, okay, this is our best way to beat South Africa. Bat first, runs on the board, and then try and put pressure, scoreboard pressure. First game, so the pressure is on South Africa to do well. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they've chosen to bat first.
I'm wondering if a way to put Temba Bavuma or the South African top order under pressure was to put them into bat on a cloudy day with the advantage of the rain as well. Andy, I'm trying to think of the tactical advantage Zimbabwe have batting first? They chased reasonably well in round one.
I'm really surprised at that decision. I don't understand it. With the weather around, that's one argument, a strong argument for bowling first. And then the other one is the South African quicks are quite formidable. They've got, as Faf mentioned earlier, they've got a really good attack. And facing those guys first up, I think they're just putting themselves under undue pressure. I think getting into the game with the ball and saying to Temba Bavuma and his lot, go on, see what you can do against our reasonable bowling attack. I think that would have been the way to go if I'd been making that decision. But hopefully they prove me wrong.
I'm just trying to think, Andy, the pattern in round one, as it turns out, albeit against lesser teams or slightly less challenging opposition, to put it well, was that they bat first. They get even anywhere near 140, 150, even in cases 120 was a challenge to chase. And that's sort of what we saw at both Geelong and in Hobart. What will it take for these teams to just look at the Super 12s differently? Obviously, there's not a lot of experience for Zimbabwe's players coming up against this level of competition. But are these the kind of things that are challenging for a team that doesn't have the experience of playing in big rounds in the ICC tournaments?
Well, I think when they're making these decisions on toss, they'll have had a look at the stats. They'll have a look at the flow of the tournament. They have been playing matches at Hobart, so they do know the conditions there pretty well. I think one of the challenges for them on this occasion is going to be a little bit of bounce in this pitch. Watching the game earlier in the day, guys like Taskin Ahmed made the ball hurry on a little, I thought. So at night, that should actually be exacerbated a little. So the South African quicks are going to be a handful. I think they've left Shamsi out. Yes. So their battery of quicks plus Maharaj that's a pretty tough attack on the surface, I reckon.
All right, let's go straight to team news then. And if last teed it up, let's go to South Africa's team first up. And we were waiting to see if Marco Jansen gets a game. He was called in for Dwayne Pretorius, who was unfortunately ruled out due to injury in this World Cup. But the combination they've gone with is Seamers along with Keshav Maharaj. They've given room to Wayne Parnell as well in a team that otherwise sees both Temba Bavuma and Quinton de Kock at the top. Riley Rousseau hit some serious form in that series against India. Aiden Markram, David Miller, Tristan Stubbs in his first World Cup game. And Parnell along with Kagiso Rabada, Rick Norke and Lungi Ngidi will form the pace attack, along with Keshav Maharaj as the lone spinner. Faf, take me through that one. Best team or team for the conditions today?
Yeah, I think that's probably the two teams that South Africa is going to look to run throughout this World Cup. It's a combination of backing your quicks, your tall, fast quicks, adding Lungi and Giri to the attack there with Nokia and Rabada, and then Parnell is your left arm seamer with Keshav. This season he's bowled really economical, so I think he's jumped ahead in terms of Shamsi, first choice spinner for Boucher. So it's a really, really strong bowling attack. And then I think, as we go through the tournament, they would see how they Shamsi in for one of those fast bowlers.
Like that team, Anil, Tabriz Shamsi, you always like wrist spinners, but...
Yes, but I think, South Africa have gone with that extra fast bowler, looking at the attack, looking at the pitch, and also against Zimbabwe. And I think the experience of these fast bowlers, is something that we can all look forward to. And Wayne Parnell gets in and Maharaj ahead of Shamsi because he can bat as well. So perhaps that's one of the reasons. And I think this is a very formidable South African bowling attack.
All right. Now, Faf du Plessis points out that South Africa, what makes them favourites in this tournament is the fact that conditions are similar to back home. But if you just look at their record in Australia in T20 eyes, we're looking at a team that's won 28.5%. It's not a big sample size, 7 matches. They've lost 5 and won just the 2. It's a funny little stat, but it's hard sometimes when you have to assess bilateral T20I cricket. You just keep that in mind. Faf, is there a reason that's what that stat says? Surprises me a little.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that stat either. That surprises me as well. But look, yeah, I think this is completely different. Why I think South Africa is really strong this tournament is I do believe that batsmen when you matches, but bowlers when you tournaments. And this is one of the strongest bowling attacks, I think, this World Cup. They have a lot of variety. So I think all in favour for them to do well. But as I said earlier, the pressure of the World Cup is something that we as South Africans always have to deal with, the ICC events. And as I also said, this is how you start. Get some nice confidence early doors, rattle it, but bowlers bowl really well, get stuck into them, have a good first game, and then get that confidence ready for the next few games.
All right, now we're going to pick up some key players for South Africa in this World Cup, and they don't get any more significant than Quinton de Kock. If you just look at 2022 though, Quinton de Kock, who seemed just a bit of the boil in the series against India that preceded this T20 World Cup, had an excellent 2021 in T20 as averaging in excess of 40. Seems to have just dropped a bit to 22.8. Andy, spent a lot of time with him in the IPL. No, Quinton de Kock's this dangerous batter in every format, every franchise he plays for. Are we just seeing him go off the boil a little this calendar year?
Well, we've definitely seen it. The stats back it up and they're not lying. But he is a wonderful player. I've always enjoyed watching him play. Beautiful style to his game. Beautiful flow of the bat. Typical sort of left-hander that looks really pretty to watch. But here we're looking for output. And, I think through his career, he's had a few little lulls like this. But if he gets really turned on by the challenge of the World Cup and a real determination to make a difference for his team in this tournament, South Africa haven't won a World Cup. And if they get him really motivated, or if he gets himself really motivated, he could be an absolute, match winner and tournament winner, perhaps. He's got that amount of talent. He's got all the experience necessary. So I think what's happening between his ears and in his heart will determine to a large extent how well he does this tournament. I wouldn't worry too much that he's had a quiet time. He can turn it on.
I'd love to know though, when we talk about IPL franchises, Anil would know this, you would know this, we always love to see whether this data that we sit and dissect in studios or in our offices is actually ever presented to players, and in particular a player like Quinton de Kock. I'll just bring up one thing for you now. His when he's been dismissed, his scoring range tends to be dismissed very early when scores of 1 to 9. If you took 0 to 9, that's 5 out of 9 games that he's been dismissed early. Now that's simple cricketing logic, right? You're going to get a batter out early more often than not. But I wonder if you ever present this data to a Quinton de Kock, Andy, and say, yeah, maybe you need to watch a couple, or maybe you need to worry about, your first 10 or 12 runs.
Raunak, I can tell you, presenting data to players is a dangerous pastime, and you've got to be really careful about how and when and who you might present data to. Quinton, I don't think would be one of those guys that I would present too much data to. But it's interesting looking at those early dismissals, because Quinton's he's a pretty laid back guy, isn't he? And occasionally when I watch him play, it looks as if he's sort of a little bit dozy at the start of his innings sometimes. So let's from a Zimbabwean perspective, let's hope he does stroll out a little bit dozy tonight.
If only we had someone who maybe at every now and every occasion had to just wake his opening partner up. So let me ask Faf du Plessis if that's ever the case with Quinton de Kock. It almost sometimes seems like he's bored of scoring runs. He's just going about it. He whacks bowlers around and he's like, yeah, it's just all in a day's work. Tell me more about Quinton de Kock, Faf. He seems to be having a bit of a lull. Andy says he gets these periods in his career. You know him better than anybody.
Yeah, Quinny's personality is one exactly like that. The way he bats on the field is what he's like off the field. He's such a laid-back character. It doesn't look like he's ever listening to anything you're saying, but he does listen. As Andy said, he's probably not the right guy to be throwing at water and matchups and all those things at Quinny. He's a see ball, hit ball kind of player. He doesn't want to think too much about the game. He doesn't want to think about his technique too much. He just wants to go out there, see the ball and react. And now that's obviously a really good thing sometimes, But obviously, times you want to make sure that he starts really well as well, and that's something possibly he can get better at. But I think what's crucial for Quinny is and all batters really is when you do get in and you get an opportunity to make a difference on the impact of the game, that you go from 30 to 60, 70, 80, because that really makes a difference to the team at the end of the day. And that's something Quinny does really well. Yes, he has a couple of low scores, but when he gets in, he can really win you the match. And that's what he is. So South Africa would hope that he could win, 2 or 3 matches on his own if he has a little purple patch. He scored some runs leading into this World Cup. So hopefully he can do that. He's a big player for the Proteas. If he does well, he's one of the senior statesmen on that side. You want your big boys to be forming at a tournament like that. And Quinny is up there with the most experience in that side.
I wonder if he could play a dual role here as well, Faf. We've spoken of the Themba Bavuma issue. We just bring out some numbers to illustrate the form in case you've not been following Themba's recent form. He's of course had his share of injury too. We must bring that up. It's not been the happiest year for Themba as far as on-field issues go. Strike rate of under 100 is least for a power play strike rate for a batter in T20Is. It's with a qualification of at least 200 runs. So it's not a stat you want to be part of. Faf, we had this great conversation during the IPL too of the importance of one partner, the opening partner to the other, and how we saw the combination of you and Virat Kohli made a huge difference. If, say, somebody like you among the runs, could help bring a batter who's searching for form, even if he's as great as Kohli, back to his game. You got Bavuma here who's struggling for form. Can Quinton de Kock perform that role? He's already spoken of his own lack of form.
Yeah, that definitely helps you as an opening partner. If you have someone on the other side, it just allows you a couple of balls to just get yourself in. We know with Themba, he's someone that's going to give himself a few balls, and there's nothing wrong with that. And Quinny is a guy that goes pretty much straight away. I think the challenging thing for South Africa is if Quinton doesn't get off to a quick start, what happens then to that power play? And that's really when Themba then has to take the reins and say, right, I'm going to take the game on here. Because we know these days it's so crucial for that power play to be aggressive, to take the game on, because certainly when you get through the power play, it's a lot easier to restrict the guy. So, yeah, I think I mentioned earlier his role is probably he thinks he needs to bat through. But also what I think will help him is the conditions in Australia. The pitches are a little bit faster. He's quite a small guy, so he's never going to be Andre Russell. He's going to be a timer of ball. The more pace that there is in the wicket, the more it will suit him just to pierce gaps, play overfield, just trust batsmanship more than power.
All right, we will see how Quinton de Kock goes. He'll have to wait his turn though to bat. Firstly, Zimbabwe won the toss and they're batting first. Secondly, it looks like players who came out for the anthems and went back in have to wait a bit longer. It looks like we've got a burst of rain at Hobart. So we'll keep the conversation going with Anil Kumble, Andy Flower and Faf du Plessis just for a bit longer. Let's delve deeper into stats. I hope Andy likes this segment. I know Anil doesn't mind it when our senior data analyst Gaurav Sundararaman finds some cricketing theory that's been circling around the numbers that he commands, and it gives us a talking point or two. This time it's about Kagiso Rabada. Let's go to Gaurav.
Thanks, Raunak. Today we are going to be talking about South Africa's most important bowler, Kagiso Rabada. His record in T20 Is has been very, very poor this season, especially the last 6-7 matches. He's been going at a very, very high economy rate, and across all phases, when you look at power play, middle overs and death, barring the power play, he's been very poor in the middle overs and in the death. What could be this potential reason? I looked up the numbers across all T20s, generally about his variations in the death. What you can see is he has a off cutter, he has a leg cutter. Both these deliveries have gone for very, very high economy rate. Whereas when he bowls his top delivery, he's bowled very well. He doesn't have too many variations as well in the death. This could be one of the biggest challenges South Africa face in this tournament. Although the pace and bounce and the conditions are going to help him, if he does not have these new variations, he could have some problems in the death. I would like to ask the panel, what can Rabada do differently in the death apart from bowling those wide and straight yorkers?
All right, let's ask his most recent IPL coach if he's ever presented that data to Kagiso.
No, I certainly didn't. All I said Kagiso was because the clothing was red. I said in the power play, all you think is you have a red ball and white clothes on, and then think of wearing the red clothes and the white ball only towards the end. That was my only message to him. He said, "Oh, okay, I've never thought about it like that." So, no, but he's a great bowler. I don't think you tell too many things to someone like Kagiso, who's been, when he finishes his career, he'll be one of the greats of the game. And he's done exceptionally well in all formats of the game. And it's tough when you're playing day in, day out. It gets to you, and sometimes the T20 format is such that yes, you show those numbers, but where those boundaries have come, it could be of inside edge, it could just be off the edges. So he gets hit. A lot of boundaries get hit of him. It's not necessarily good shots. It's sometimes flies off slips.
Interesting. So you view those numbers with a little skepticism, with some context.
And I think it's all about, again, his rhythm. He's a rhythm bowler, and if he's in his rhythm, then the pace automatically comes up. He's not someone, when you see him, you don't feel like he's bowling at 140 plus. It's all about rhythm, and that's exactly what he does. So I'm sure World Cup is really motivating for him and South Africa, so I'm sure he'd be up there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get Andy and Faf to weigh in on this as well. Let's go to Andy first. Let's see how he viewed those numbers. Anil is ready to just take that and throw it back in the analyst's hands and say, put that in the bin, don't disturb me, I've got bigger things to do. I wonder if there is something you'd like to weigh in looking at those numbers, Andy, and whether we have seen Kagiso Rabada as the complete T20 bowler, or is there still an area or two that needs working?
Look, he's a sensational operator, as Anil said, absolute world beater. But he has, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had a quiet IPL. Yes. So he has had a sort of extended period of time recently where his form is slightly off for whatever reason. I think Gaurav points out a couple of interesting stats around his slower balls. And the slower ball, I think sometimes, I'm not saying this about Rabada himself, but sometimes bowlers forget that they aren't just bowling a slower ball. The slow ball has to contain some deception. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to deceive the batsman and therefore mess up the timing of the shot. And I don't think he's got one of the best slow balls in the world. His strengths are his pace, his bounce, his aggression, and his nous about what ball to bowl at what time. And so his three main weapons are his heavy length, his an occasional Yorker towards the death, and a good bouncer. Those are his main weapons. His slower balls, I don't think, are part of that main weaponry for him. But these guys are not automatons, They human beings that are dealing with the sort of flows of life like everyone else. And he's probably just going through a slight lull at the moment. He's got such quality, both physically and technically, and upstairs, I think, that I wouldn't be surprised if he has a great tournament.
Right. I'm going to just my lay memory of Rabada. And Faf, you've captained the man. When he bowls that hard length, when he, like Anil says, when he's in the mood, nobody seems to get a hold of him. He can bowl to any batter and keep him quiet. Every now and then, there'll be this slow ball that'll get tonked. I know Anil says we should observe whether these are legit shots or not. But from your experience of having played with him, having captained him, is that slow ball something that you welcome, or is it one of those things you got there, he's bowled it again?
No, I think a little bit of both. I think Andy's got it spot on there. I would say that KG's weapons is definitely the ability to bowl a Yorker at any stage of the game is exceptional. Even up front, I remember when he was bowling at his best, he would get so many wickets with that Yorker up front. And then that hard bouncer, probably, as he said, is his three weapons. So whether the innings in the start of the innings, the middle, or the death, I still think those are his three best weapons. And then with that, obviously you would like at some stages just try to mess up the batsman's routine a little bit and chuck in a little slow ball there. He also mentions that it's not that much slower in terms of speed differences, and he's right. That's probably the area where KG can try and drop that speed of that slow ball a little bit more so that he can deceive the batsman. But yeah, KG is amazing cricket player. The talent that sits in that man's body is exceptional. And once again, South Africa needs him this tournament to fire. And I think what happens with a lot of players now is they're three format players. You can see a little bit of form dipping, the amount of cricket they're playing these days. But because this is a World Cup, you expect KG to bring his A game, to bring those energy levels. And once again, if he can bowl well, South Africa will be very, very dangerous.
Just quick follow up on that last comment, Faf. Very interesting that you say that. Does that three format thing affect bowlers, fast bowlers, more than batters?
I think so. I mean, it's an obvious thing that you, as a fast bowler, have to run in and bowl quick all the time. Now, I look at the great Dale Steyn, and I think KG is doing that to a degree these days. Is you don't always have to bowl 150. You know, Dale picked his moments when he cranked it up and he bowled really quickly. Initially, we try and focus more on skill, and then when he had a little sniff, he really cranked it up to 150. So I can see KG is doing that as well because, you know, with especially playing Test cricket, one-day cricket now as well, there's a lot of overs that these guys have to bowl. KG is an amazing athlete, so injuries is not something he luckily has had to deal with too often. But still, I mean, your body goes through a lot. But then the second part of that is the mental aspect. And, you know, you get physical tiredness, but then also the mental aspect, which you feel like it's just another game. I'm playing another game. They don't stop, and that's where really I think KG can make a difference. Now there's a World Cup. You don't know as a player how many World Cups you're going to play still, so you don't need any reason to bring everything you have within yourself to this World Cup. So I'm really looking forward to see what he brings this tournament.
Yep, we're going to wait for Kagiso Rabada. He was all set to perhaps take the new ball, but we had to wait because the rain has come down at Hobart. Right, let's quickly, before we wrap things up, confirm things for Zimbabwe too. The 11 that they've picked. It's a funny old game now where you've had the toss and now you've suddenly had rain. Who knows if we'll lose some overs, but they've gone with the same team that played that last round one game against Scotland, so no changes there. You're going to have Craig Irvine, who's looking for a bit of form himself, along with Regis Chakabwa at the top of the order. Sean Williams has been in pretty patchy form too. They rely so heavily on Sikandar Raza with bat and ball, but he was sensational in that first round. Milton Chumbak and Tonka Few, Eskin Ryan Burr. Luke Njongwe showed he can bat, but the seam bowling responsibilities essentially lie with Tendai Chatara, Richard and Garva and Blessing Muzarabani. So it's the same team that did well for them in the first round that they've stuck with. Have Zimbabwe. This is that curious, Anil Kumble and we were having a nice chat today of the many rules the game needs to revisit and laws. One of them I can bring up now is the toss happening, then a rain delay. We could potentially lose a few overs, and now suddenly would a captain think, gee, if it's an 8 over game or a 10 over game, I'd rather bowled?
Yeah, no, I think that's something that I'm sure will get discussed in the next committee meeting, you know, about, especially in this format, you know, in T20 format where every over counts and every sort of change that you make matters the most. And yes, in a game like this where the tosses happen, the teams have been announced, and you know, it could be eventually a 5 over game. Yeah. So
would you welcome that though, allowing the teams to be changed in this sort of scenario where the tosses happen and now suddenly there'll be a reduction of overs?
Yeah, I would, but again, you know, if you look at the scenario already before the toss itself, I mean, you knew that there was rain around, so I'm sure that both the teams would have taken that into account, saying, okay, it could be a reduced game, and that's how you sort of take a chance, and that's why it's surprising that Zimbabwe have chosen to bat first after winning the toss. That's something that obviously is you know, very, very surprising from a Zimbabwe standpoint.
All right. Well, it may take us some time to go there. Let's get a quick word from Andy Flower on whether he'd welcome this rule. Maybe this is Zimbabwe's best team, Andy. They would have played it regardless of how many overs. But would you welcome a rule like that? Change the teams after the toss if the overs get reduced?
What the fans want is the best contest between the best two 11s, and if the best two 11s need to be altered slightly, given that the match changes to a 5 or 6 over game, then the fans would like to see the best 11s take each other on. I don't see why why sticking with the status quo makes particular sense. I'd like someone to explain that to me if possible at some stage.
All right, Faf, let's ask the contemporary player if he agrees. Happy with that? Change the teams if the overs get affected after rain delay after the toss?
To answer Zandy's question, I think he was asking it to one of the ICC guys, but I'm happy to jump in there. I can certainly tell you from a captaincy perspective, it's quite a decision-making process when there's rain around. You know, do we, like from a captain's point of view, you try and push the umpires to say, let's wait with the toss, because you do want to make sure you pick the right team for if it gets affected by the rain. So it's like, can we not do the toss now because the rain is coming in? Just making sure that you push them a little bit for that. And then I think, once that decision made to have the toss, then it becomes an issue of like, okay, what now? And that's what Anil is rightly referring to. There's perhaps then you decide, well, we would rather want to bat second, to have a look at the opposition, to have a look at the weather, etc., etc. But in terms of a rule change, I think it's something that will be nice for especially the fans, to see team changes and stuff after the toss.
All right. Well, there are some things that perhaps cricket can do when it comes to breaking the status quo. Not any pull on that cricket committee still?
No.
No.
I'm done.
We always ask questions like this in India. No, any pull, any influence, any jugaad? No. All right. It's that we've gone into overtime here because of the delayed start at Hobart. But let's give up Anil a break. But I won't leave Andy Flower and Faf du Plessis without getting a comment out of what they witnessed yesterday, because that's one that goes beyond India and Pakistan. I think all over the world there was a reaction for what we saw. Mayhem in the final over. Mad game between the two teams that really got the tournament going. So let's start with Faf. I wonder if you sent Kohli a text saying, gee, I knew that was going to happen after you batted one season with me.
Yeah, what an exceptional game to start the World Cup off. I think it just got everyone who wasn't necessarily interested in watching this T20 World Cup. Everyone's eyes is on the tournament now. Yeah, I'm really happy for Virat. I mean, he's obviously had a year where he's had a lot of people talking about his form. You know, is the great Virat Kohli going to be back to his best again? And what a way to answer his critics. Just the way he composed that innings. Obviously, Virat is known as one of the greatest chasers in the game. So to see a master at work like he was yesterday, one of the innings of World Cup events, that second last six hit over his head was probably one of the best shots I've ever seen. So yes, after the match, could not wait to send him a message to say congrats on an amazing innings.
All right, well done, Faf. Andy Flower, that'll become one of those great shots, isn't it? Kohli to Haritz Rav straight over his head at the MCG.
Yeah, sensational shot. And it was great. It was wonderful to see the match itself live up to the billing of the India-Pakistan thing. Beautiful game to watch. I would have loved to have been at the stadium itself. I thought also interestingly, I think Pakistan suffered a little from not having an all-rounder, a seam bowling all-rounder. So I thought that was a major difference in the two teams. You know, Hardik Pandya is such an amazing cricketer. I think with Kohli's runs, Pandya's runs themselves have been overlooked a little. But his overall contribution to the team effort yesterday was hugely significant. Really a huge role in winning that game for India. And Pakistan suffered for not having a fourth seam option, even if it was just for an over. So wonderful game, and looking forward to similar sort of strength of performance from both sides.
Well, let's hope it's not the last of the close games in this tournament. It's only just begun. So let's hope for a game between South Africa and Zimbabwe at some point. And when we do get an innings break, we'll have the thoughts of Andy Flower and Faf du Plessis. It's been a wonderful, timeless sort of conversation. We've been allowed to go on a bit because of the rain delay, which is nice sometimes. It's like going back to the timeless games of ODI and Test cricket, and though we have to rush everything in 2020. It was nice talking to Andy and Faf.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's nice to catch up with Andy, and it was great to have Faf.
Yep.
Was playing and getting runs again in T20 cricket across the world. So yes, a new perspective from a current player to get on T20 cricket, and Andy, of course, it's always nice to catch.
The good coaches listen to the current players. So it's good that Anil Kumble said that. So too Andy Flower. But let's give them all a break. Faf, Andy, top debut. Let's get you guys in a bit. Let's hope we get a game. And we'll hear more from these fine gentlemen, Anil Kumble too, in studio with me on Maruti Suzuki Presents ESPN Cricket for T20 Timeout. Stay tuned to our ball by ball page and our live scorecard for updates. If you're in our part of the world, you can of course catch it all on Disney Plus Hotstar as well. We will pick up the chat once we have more news from Hobart. Bye-bye.